Hello, my name is Ali. I am a genderqueer individual who utilizes they them pronouns. I wish to explore gender through the lens of someone who was raised as a girl and then continuously developed their identity throughout their early teen years up until adulthood. I recognize that within the structure of power and through intersectionality, I have a combined experience of having privilege because of my perceived race and class. My family is Mexican, but I am very white presenting. Um, but, with that privilege, I also experience inequities because of my sex, gender identity, and queerness. Um, More in depth, I wanted to share a story of discomfort with gender identity. I value and love the fact that I am genderqueer, but also embracing that identity in social scenarios has its displeasure. Uh, if it were not for social constructivism, being that I'm assigned female at birth, and genderism. One of the some few reasons behind this discomfort revolves around my identity and the workplace. For nearly 4 years now, I've served under the official title Youth Development Professional. As a sort of after-school teacher, I also work during summer breaks, supporting our kiddos while their adults are off at work. But yeah, essentially, I'm a child care worker who helps supervise children in a structured setting, who assists with homework and expanded learning outside of the school day. But this is also a field that is largely dominated by women. I began this position when I was still not quite settled with my gender identity and thought it would be easier if I just presented as like a girl at work. Of course, when it comes to the kids and how they perceive my gender, is really no bother to me because, well, they're kids. I do understand, that they're capable of comprehending nuanced gender identity, but I don't fully expect them to articulate things like pronouns and queerness. I mean, they forget their own name half of the time. Yeah. So I became Miss Allie as my work persona. Um, but of course, things for the other adults in my position, like coworkers, my bosses, um, I had this feeling of discomfort whenever they referred to me as a girl and utilized she, her pronouns when referring to me. And so I made the decision to slowly, to start to tiptoe out of the closet to a few staff members to kind of test the waters. And two of those staff members were two of my bosses. Both were accepting at the moment, but things got quickly uncomfortable in practice. The first boss immediately forgot that I ever took the time to come out. Um, yeah, it's like the next day it didn't even happen. This made me, feel kind of silly for being kind of so terrified to come out in the first place that it kind of made me regret having even put the effort in sharing something that, that was personal, that was sensitive to me. And then the second boss for the first week would overcorrect himself in a fairly dramatic way, kind of like I was gonna take him out back with a rifle and put him down like a sick dog. But then eventually, like after a month, it was like I never came out in the first place. I was like back to ground zero. I never realized that being out as like genderqueer or non-binary would require so much vigilance and constant exposure to discomfort because the people around me never took the time to understand and still kind of saw me how they originally perceived me, which was, a girl, which of course isn't accurate. Um, but nowadays I am in a different work setting, still position, still same job, just a different location, and now I comfortably use the name Mix Alley, so So instead of Miss or Mr., it's MX and then Ali. And I use that in the pronoun, and I use that in the classroom. And, I do present myself as non binary. If kids ask about me, sometimes they like to ask about the MX. I'll explain it to them that, that's just kind of what feels right to me. And, if they dig a little bit deeper, then, I'm happy to explain it to them if they ask. Um, yeah, but still, when it comes to the other staff, my coworkers, and my bosses, I'm still not quite vigilant enough when it comes to reminding them of my preferred pronouns. Um, but I'm pretty sure that I've made it clear that I'm not a girl. Still, despite the efforts, my gender identity is very rarely acknowledged, but it's not really in a way that's necessarily malicious, just kind of in a way that's sort of negligence. Uh, but some people try, and I'll give them that. I'll give them credit for that. Moving on, I would say that the two chapters from the readings, Conceptualizing Structures of Powers and Social Constructionism, did a fantastic job of verbalizing concepts that I was kind of already familiar with, but I was able to see it through a more academic lens. I would say that the social institution, my workplace, upholds the structure of power from a cisgendered perspective. That there is certainly an epistemic injustice where I'm kind of in the position to have to explain my identity and remind us that it exists. It's an emotional labor that I am pretty avoidant of due to like the previously mentioned discomforts. I'm working on that confidence. It's a work in progress. Um, but looking at the social construction example that on heterosexuality that was provided in the social construction reading, um, it kind of shares with us that there is often a development in the understanding of um, like a definition. So the example, went in and talking about how the way that we perceived the definition of heterosexuality is. And I feel like that's kind of the same for, genderqueer identities as well, where society is non-linearly working on accepting and comprehending gender identity, gender queerness, transgender identities, so going back to the aforementioned bosses from before, I can't exactly say where on the level of understanding that they were on, but it was clear that the social construction of gender queerness has not progressed enough for them to articulate that in a sense that they weren't being disrespectful. They were in a way disrespecting me. The social hierarchy has provided them the advantage of being cisgendered men. I forgot to mention these two bosses who kind of forgot that I had ever came out to them. One overcorrected himself a lot before kind of just dropping it. They were both cisgendered men, uh, men born at birth and continue to identify with being a man. Um, and so that's what they were within the structure of power, which exists as a concept and notion that those who are queer and gender non-conforming are marginalized to a degree. Despite all that, I do still receive the privilege of being a white appearing woman in their mid-20s. Especially before I buzzed all of my hair off, I had a significantly more feminine appearance. Um, like, if I go into a gas station, there's going to be no gas station clerks following me around, worried that I may shoplift, which is something a black woman my age might have experienced. Or, how I'm not exactly worried that a doctor may perceive my pain differently, because, supposedly black, you know, Americans are biologically different, which is not true at all. We all have the same biology. They don't feel less pain, which is unfortunately something that our medical system is working on, trying to say that that's false. And those are two things that I don't have to worry. Same thing goes for class as well. I'm in an incredibly privileged position to be able to afford rent in this one bedroom space that I live in California, probably one of the most expensive states. And I grew up going to a public school that was able to afford the necessary amount of staff and educational materials. So I am incredibly grateful to be in a position where right now the only thing I'm really worried about is, going to work, keeping up my grades, and that sometimes people call me a girl. But this, of course, does not take away from the harsher reality that many transgender and genderqueer people have experienced profound amount of genderisms, homophobia, transphobia by those who discriminate against queerness and gender queerness, that it has compromised their safety and even their lives. Um, but this especially goes for those who have to deal with multiple intersectional identities, which, the experiences that a Black transgender woman experiences is not going to be the same as my experience. But overall, my gender is profoundly meaningful to me, and I'm proud to be genderqueer, even if, you know, my understanding of my personal self concept would be much, much easier if I was simply a cisgendered girl. I'm not a cisgendered girl, but dang, would my life be so much easier if I were? But being queer has given me an opportunity to deeper reflect on my identity, experiment, and experience the euphoria of, when I feel affirmed in my identity. Discomfort and challenge doesn't always mean bad. Sometimes it means self care and love.